Hello, my name is Angel Spurlock, and my action research looked at the question, how do secondary teachers' beliefs about English language learners' ability to learn affect their lesson modifications to allow for the meaningful acquisition of English language academic content? The district that I work in is very small. There are only 2 ELL students in the high school, which means the majority of teachers do not have an English language learning student in their day-to-day lives. However, studies show that this is not going to stay that way. ELL students are the fastest growing student population, and the district itself even gained 10 students in this population in a single year. Through this study, the school is going to be able to focus on the positive modifications that we're already using, but also learn more about more appropriate modifications, such as systemic functional linguistics. Systemic functional linguistics, or SFL, sees language as a meaning-making resource and allows students to learn content while also analyzing text to learn English. The study is going to allow us to continue to provide the best support possible for all of our students. It will also allow the educational community as a whole to take a deeper look at what's currently occurring in the classroom and how that's affected by teacher beliefs. In the current literature, there are 4 repeated themes we see relating to this question. The first is teacher attitudes about ELL students. Some attitudes are positive and some are negative, while one study even found that teachers have positive beliefs about the student, but negative beliefs about the student's culture, which could result in harmful effects on learning. The second theme we see is perceived responsibility and ability to teach ELL students. All studies found that teachers do feel responsible to teach ELL students, but they don't feel that they're capable of doing so. The third theme we find is knowledge and application of modifications in the classroom. All studies found that teachers have little to no knowledge or application of appropriate modifications in the classroom. On a positive note, one study did find that teachers do understand to systemically reduce modifications as proficiency increases. The final theme we see is on beliefs about ELL students' language learning needs. Several studies found that teachers have serious misconceptions about what it means to learn a second language and the needs that come along with that. One study also found that although teachers do understand to reduce those modifications, they're doing so based on their own perceptions of English proficiency rather than on assessment scores. Based on that information, I decided to utilize a triangulated mixed methods action research study, which allowed me to collect both qualitative and quantitative data. This is particularly important anytime we have a self-reported survey or instrument to reduce bias, which I do have in this study. The quantitative data in this case was collected with a Likert scale survey, an observation in which participants were rated on a 1 to 4 scale on the consistency of their actions, and a lesson modification checklist, while the qualitative data was collected via the observation and an unstructured interview. The participants were 6 voluntary teachers. There were 4 female and 2 male, each with varying degrees of experience with ELL students, and subject areas. This allows the results of the study to be more generalizable, as well as lessen the effect of bias from having too few or too many teachers with specified knowledge. Participants chose their own code number on the consent form, and that code number was used to code all data. All paper copies of data were kept in a locked drawer, which I had the only key to, and all electronic data was kept on a password-protected computer. All data would be deleted or shredded as of January 1st, 2020. This table shows us the demographic data. It's easy to see that we have a large span of experience levels, as well as a mix of required and elective courses. The subject areas range from science to English to theater. For the data collection, participants first completed a Likert scale survey on their beliefs about ELL students. The survey collected quantitative data, and to negate as much bias as possible, used predetermined statements. I then completed an observation in their classroom using the culturally responsive instruction observation protocol to determine what, if any, modifications were already being used and if the beliefs from the survey could be seen in the classroom. Participants then modified that lesson plan as if they had had an ELL student in order to gain insight into their modifications. Finally, more information was gained through a final interview to allow the participant to explain any previous actions. To analyze the data, each dataset was coded several times. Quantitative data was coded by first determining the average of the scores. Themes were produced from those averages before being placed in a table to analyze for meta-themes. The qualitative data was color-coded to find repeating patterns or ideas, which were then placed into a table and coded to find meta-themes. After all of the meta-themes were found, they were placed in one table which was analyzed for triangulation. Triangulation helps to ensure the validity of the results by negating bias, since triangulated data can only come from all data sources. The results of this study were very interesting. From the survey, where 1 is completely disagree and 5 is completely agree, we can see that the participants disagreed with the ideas that the first language was not a valuable resource, that students were an obstacle to themselves, and that students were not capable of learning individually. However, they have more of a neutral belief about how students learn English and content, and they tended to agree with the idea that English can be learned after 2 to 3 years. This table shows the official meta themes from all data sources. We can already see some repeated ideas, but those are better shown on the following table. These were the meta themes that contained common ideas throughout all data sources. First, we find that throughout all sources, vocabulary or language was viewed as an important resource. We can also find the idea that students can learn with individual, general modifications assisting in learning. We can assert from these themes that teachers believe that language and vocabulary are important resources and that they use them as such. However, they do not always do so in meaning-making ways. We can also assert that teachers believe students can learn without dumbing down the content, with individual modifications, although those modifications are very general. The goal of this action research was to discover how teacher beliefs affected their modifications, and as we could see from Table 5, I was able to gain insight into 2 ways this happens. First, I learned that teachers believe and act on the fact that language or vocabulary is an essential resource. The survey showed that participants believe students' first language is valuable, while simultaneously showing in the observation that they already focus on language and vocabulary in class. Although their modifications were more general, rather than focusing on meaning-making via SFL, the modifications still showed that improving vocabulary was a top priority for them, and the interviews again indicated a focus on the role of vocabulary in the classroom. I also learned that teachers believe and act on the idea that students are capable of learning with individual supports. The survey showed that they believe that ELL students are capable of learning, but that student individual lives can affect that. The observation, modifications, and interviews all showed that individual needs were considered and addressed in the classroom without dumbing down the content. By not dumbing down the content, the teachers were showing that they believe all students can learn while also addressing those individual needs. A third and unexpected outcome of this study showed that there were modifications and strategies being used in the classroom that teachers were unaware of. Teachers are analyzing vocabulary in meaning-making ways via systemic functional linguistics, and they are connecting their text to the real world, but they either have no idea that they're doing so, or they didn't mention these as strong modifications for ELL students. The literature corroborates these results. We can first see the theme that language and vocabulary are essential resources, as studies found that teachers hold positive feelings for strategies that are focused on using vocabulary in active ways. We can also see the theme that ELL students learn with individual modifications, as studies show that teachers understand that individual modifications are necessary and that students can learn with them. They also showed that when teachers begin looking at their students individually, they find better ways to teach them. Finally, studies show that teachers do use strategies they aren't aware of. Several studies found that in spite of scoring low on knowledge tests about specific strategies, teachers are still using those strategies in their classroom. Based on this information and on the literature, my recommendations for Boyle County High School are to first bring attention to and encourage the positive behaviors that are already occurring. The literature above showed that when attention was brought to those modifications that were being done without knowing, those modifications were done more often. It's also going to bring them into light for more teachers to follow. Second, more professional development is necessary for second language acquisition and systemic functional linguistics. Teachers are already using vocabulary as a resource, but more information is needed on how to do this specifically for ELL students in that meaning-making way. The studies above showed that vocabulary strategies that involve active analysis of texts resulted in higher understanding and improved English proficiency. My final recommendation would be professional development on effective accommodations, including systemic functional linguistics. Teachers already understand that ELL students can learn with those modifications, so training in this area is only going to improve the modifications being used and their efficacy. Several studies showed that with professional development, teachers were able to adapt their modifications to address individual needs of students better. My recommendations for the educational community as a whole are first, continue research in this area. Neither of the literature reviews resulted in any studies focusing on this question in particular, showing a need for more information in this area. Because the participants did not have ELL students in their classroom, bias could have occurred via the self-reported instrument of the modifications. Therefore, more studies are needed in this area with differing environments. Second, more research is needed into why and how teachers are using strategies they're unaware of. While there are studies that discuss the phenomenon, few discuss why it happens or if the strategies are just as efficient as teachers who are aware that they are using the strategy. Therefore, more research is needed here. Overall, my research showed that teacher beliefs do influence modifications, and while more research is necessary, this will allow the ELL community and districts alike to focus on the beliefs of teachers in addition to the knowledge of modifications alone. Thank you.